Story 1. Around a year and a half ago, I rekindled my interest in Yu-Gi-Oh! In a significant way. There's actually a substantial adult audience for the game, and I've managed to form many great friendships at my local hangout playing and trading cards. Like many of my peers, I possess several different decks and a binder filled with shiny, expensive cardboard. One day, an individual I'm not particularly fond of, but who insists on staying close to me, I don't mind too much, although he can be somewhat overwhelming. Let's refer to him as Ronald, stands up from his seat in a rage and announces that his infinite impermanence has been stolen. For context, this is a highly valuable, sought-after card that, at the time, consistently held a market value of £90 each. Ronald's anger is justified, but he hastily has one of my friends, let's call him Motley, searched for the card despite having no evidence. He doesn't find the card, but because Motley allegedly has a history from childhood of minor theft, Ronald continues to blame him, tarnishing his reputation at the hangout. Ronald doesn't face any consequences due to lack of evidence, and the disappearance of his infinite impermanence remains a mystery, though Motley is still treated with distrust by the regular crowd thereafter. I believe I'm a good judge of character, and after spending time with Motley, I never believed he was a thief. I had even left him alone with my cards many times before, with no disappearances. I felt the way he was treated was extremely unfair, but figured there was nothing to be done. This part of the story was relayed to me by a friend, let's call him Kismet, and originally had no connection to it all, but it turned out to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. He was at a major international tournament called X Milan and engaged in trading with a group of hardcore players there. He met an individual who had an infinite impermanence up for trade and was looking for a card of much lesser value. Kismet didn't have it but knew I possessed it, and the individual actually lived near our hangout. So Kismet decided to trade for mine to give to the person he'd met at a later date. We didn't connect the dots at the time, but I think you'll probably have realized where this is heading by now. So let's refer to the individual Kismet met at X Milan as Card Taker henceforth. The following week, Card Taker appears at the local hangout, but of course, I don't recognize him. We trade a bit while surrounded by people, and he only wants an extremely inexpensive card, less than 99p, while all I can see are cards worth several pounds, but he says he's fine with trading those. I found it odd but reluctantly accepted. I assumed he simply didn't care about market value, and there are a few people like that, but if I'd given it more thought, I might have realized a person like that would have been taken advantage of for every valuable card in their collection by then. Through conversation with Kismet, we discover that the person I traded with that time was the same individual Kismet met at X Milan. Card Taker became a semi-regular presence at the local hangout. He was somewhat awkward and didn't fit in with any particular group. But there are many people like that who simply need to learn to be social butterflies. He tended to fade into the background, almost like someone who could have been coming there all along. One day, I arrived as usual and began trading. I traded with Card Taker at one point, but left him with a trustworthy individual while I went to the restroom. He'd mentioned what he was after, Sky Striker cards, but I told him I didn't want to trade them. We made small-level transactions and parted ways. On a whim, I checked my Sky Striker cards thinking of separating them from my trades since I wasn't actually trading them, and found that several of them had gone missing. Someone had taken one out of each set of 3 in each sleeve of Sky Striker cards. These cards weren't expensive at all, but I was still furious at the idea that someone had been so petty as to steal, especially from me. I think I would have been less personally upset if I had been physically harmed. My prime suspect, since he was the last person to touch them before I noticed, was Card Taker, but I had no evidence, or so I thought. So I put a plan in motion to recover my stolen cards. I called a muscular friend over, let's call him Mighty, briefly explained the situation to him, and asked if he would stand by the only exit in case Card Taker tried to leave when I confronted him. I approached Card Taker and asked to look through his binder under the pretense of trades, but I couldn't find any of my missing cards among them, so I returned the binder, told Card Taker about the missing Sky Strikers, and apologized to him. He took it well and acted friendly. I let Mighty know everything was fine. I assumed I wouldn't be getting my cards back, but at least they were replaceable. By the end of the day, I had traded for new copies. However, during the local level tournament that day, I spotted Card Taker lingering around the store's products a bit too suspiciously. My eyes widened involuntarily when I saw Card Taker take an item from the shelf and move it into his open bag before quickly returning it after glancing around the room. I was the only one who witnessed it, and I still couldn't quite believe what I had seen. When I arrived home, I looked through my binders again just to see if anything else was missing, and sure enough, 2 vampire suckers 20 pounds each had vanished. I contacted Kismet, who was present that day, and told him about the stolen cards, asking if he'd seen them in Card Taker's binder later that day. He had. After process of elimination, I was able to conclude that nobody besides Card Taker could possibly have taken them. I was willing to let it go to some extent before the cards had been replaced by the end of the day, but taking vampire sucker cards of real value was the final straw. I thought about it more while chatting with Kismet and realized that the infinite impermanence Card Taker was trying to trade at Ixmalan, almost desperately, must have been Ronald's, which had gone missing merely a week before. Card Taker hadn't just stolen my property, but he had stolen from others in my social circle, maybe even more than I know, and had left Motley's reputation completely tarnished as a result. He hurt my friends and damaged the atmosphere of the local hangout. I set a plan in motion. The following week, I headed to the hangout, and Card Taker showed up not long after. I approached him, as he had tried to establish a friendly rapport the week before because he'd already wound up under my suspicion. Instead of confronting him, I used that to my advantage. I offered a trade, handing him my binder. He gladly accepted, offering his own. I kept a close eye on him, ensuring nothing more was pilfered while hastily flipping through his binder. There I found the exact cards he had stolen, not even removed from the protective sleeves I had placed them in. As they were my property, I simply took my cards from his binder and tucked them under my arm, closed his binder, handed it back, took mine back, and graciously parted ways. If someone steals my cards, I'll just take them back. Card Taker seemed to have tunnel vision, I suppose. But that's not the end of the story. I wasn't satisfied with just getting my cards back. Others had been wronged, others might continue to be wronged, and I wouldn't be comfortable as long as he remained in the hangout, allowed to exist among good, honest, hard-working people. On this particular day, there was new management at the store. A rather nice individual who was anxious to ensure everything went smoothly and to establish his authority. I remembered the attempted theft I'd witnessed the previous week. I warned the manager but understood I had no evidence, and he had no real reason to believe me. So I watched Card Taker. I observed him all day. If he was standing near store products, I didn't take my eyes off him. If he was trading, I hovered over his shoulder to ensure he couldn't pilfer anything. Eventually, Motley, Ronald, and the others came in and sat down to play. I hung out with them but kept my eye on Card Taker. He drifted toward the same shelf I'd witnessed him at the previous week. My patience paid off when I saw him lift the last Soul Fusion Special Edition from the shelf and slip it into his open bag before making his way over to us to blend in. This was my chance. I immediately stood up, leaving my property in the hands of my friends, and discreetly informed the manager of what I'd seen. He glanced at the shelf, and sure enough, the last of the item had gone missing, and he hadn't sold it. Staff was short, and he was the only one at the cash register, so it had clearly been stolen by someone. He followed me over to our group, and I simply sat down, continuing my match calmly. The manager approached Card Taker and asked to search his bag. Card Taker complied, and the manager produced the Soul Fusion Special Edition from his bag in front of everybody. Card Taker whimpered a few pathetic, sorry utterances, but the new manager wasn't having any of it. "Get out," he said. The manager escorted Card Taker to the front door and forced him to leave. The manager came back over to me and thanked me sincerely, telling us to remove Card Taker if he ever returned. The others didn't quite understand what had just happened, so I gave them the full story. They were shocked, but if there's anything I'll remember from that day, It's the look on Motley's face when he realized I just completely exonerated him of any wrongdoing. I don't know if Ronald ever explicitly apologized to Motley, and his infinite impermanence was sadly lost to time. But the next time I saw him and Motley together, they were chatting like normal acquaintances. I assume the story was significant enough to spread around the group quickly, so Motley is now treated like another one of the guys. I wasn't expecting this plan to go so perfectly, but it turned out to be one of the best days of my life. Story 2. A quick backstory. I was at a large local store with a red logo, known for its bullseye symbol, just a couple of days ago. I had just finished a rare face-to-face interview, with COVID precautions thankfully in place. I was wearing a black short-sleeved collared shirt, black slacks, and nice shoes, as well as a mask. So, as far as I knew, my outfit did not resemble the store's employee uniform. As I mentioned in a previous post, I'm a bigger person, and I deal with some mental health challenges. I don't react well to being physically pushed around, and I generally prefer to avoid people, thanks to my past experiences in food service and retail during my college years. Anyway, there I was, grabbing a few last-minute items my husband had asked for, as we were preparing for Thanksgiving dinner at home. We weren't going to any family gatherings this year. I was in the grocery section, specifically looking for a type of gravy that could not be substituted. That's when I heard the familiar and dreaded, "Excuse me." I turned to see someone I had hoped never to run into again, my former boss from when I worked at a sub shop located inside a large truck stop. To say I disliked her would be an understatement. She made my 5 months at that job miserable because I refused her advances. She had a reputation for getting involved with the male employees. I quit before she could fire me, and I had heard that really got to her. I will refer to myself as me and my former boss as Karen. Me, asterisk, seeing Karen without a mask. I rolled my eyes and muttered without thinking, asterisk, "Oh, great, it's you." Karen, asterisk, turning red. A familiar sight from our past encounters, asterisk. That is not how you speak to a paying customer. Me. I'm a paying customer too, not an employee. Duh. Karen. Nonsense. Help me now, or I'll get you fired. Me, asterisk, anger rising, asterisk. You'd love that, wouldn't you? Please, leave me alone. I'm just here to shop. Karen, asterisk, narrowing her eyes, asterisk. Who do you think you are? Me. I'm a customer, just looking for gravy. Asterisk, dramatically gesturing to the gravy on the shelf, asterisk. Why don't you head back to wherever you came from and stop bothering me? At this point, I found the gravy I needed, grabbed it, and put it in my cart, ready to leave. However, as is typical of people like Karen, she wasn't about to let things go. She reached out, grabbed my arm, and squeezed, trying to pull me back toward her. I turned, not because of her, but to shake off her grip, causing her to stumble forward. She caught herself on a shelf. Karen, you tried to make me fall. You're going to regret this. I'm calling the police and pressing charges. Me. No, I made you let go of me. By all means, call the police. It's not my fault you can't keep your balance. Karen didn't take kindly to that remark, and, to my shock, slapped me hard across the face. My head was ringing, and before I even had a chance to think, I instinctively reacted. I punched her, landing a left hook that knocked her into the shelves, rendering her unconscious. As she hit the floor, her eyes rolled back, and blood trickled from her nose. I stood there, staring at my hand, shaking. I'm not one to hit anyone unless I'm defending myself, so the fact that I did it without thinking startled me. I hadn't noticed the store employee who had entered the aisle. She had heard the commotion and radioed for a manager in security while helping Karen into a sitting position as she slowly regained consciousness, clearly disoriented. When the manager and security arrived, they asked what had happened. I told them my side of the story and pointed to the cameras for confirmation. The employee backed me up, saying she had overheard the exchange and came over when she heard me asking Karen to let go of me. Karen finally came to, groggy and trying to stand, slapping the employee's hands away. She immediately started yelling that I had attacked her and demanded I be arrested. After reviewing the footage and calling an ambulance, the police arrived as well. The store banned Karen for attacking me, a fellow customer. I decided not to press charges, mostly because the punch had been a long time coming. And if I'm honest, it felt good to stand up for myself. The police asked if I was sure about not pressing charges, but when they saw the look on my face, they didn't push the issue. At this point, my anxiety was hitting hard after the adrenaline wore off, and all I wanted was to get out of there. I could feel the pressure building, and I knew an anxiety attack was coming, which is something I dread. Thankfully, I managed to avoid a full-blown panic attack, probably thanks to my medication. The manager gave me a discount at checkout, which I appreciated, though I refused to let them give me everything for free. I left the store, drove halfway home, and had to pull over to let out the emotions. I sobbed on the side of the road, releasing all the tension from the incident. When I finally made it home, my husband was just glad that I wasn't hurt or arrested. He playfully joked that I shouldn't go anywhere without him from now on, which, given my tendency to get into odd situations, I had to agree with. He's probably right, I do need supervision sometimes. But hey, no arrests yet, so I must be doing something right. I just hope I get the job. Story 3. A few years back, I worked for a chaotic and disorganized company. The job was quite soul-crushing for many reasons. Interestingly, when they terminated my employment for not performing my duties, which they could never seem to find time to train me on, but had plenty of time to criticize and mislead me about, I felt strangely relieved and liberated. Some things to note: this was a 100% remote job. They sent me a laptop to work on. I was to send it back using a box and shipping label they would provide. To make a long story short, sending the box back proved to be an absolute circus, because nobody could figure out how to do this. People quit throughout the process, and I was handed off from person to person like a hot potato. I had been trying to work out the shipping the laptop back situation since January. It was now June. Near the end of June, I received a call from someone, let's call her Karen, claiming to be the human resources head of the United States division of the company. Karen demanded to know why I had kept the laptop and not returned it. I tried to explain what had been going on, but she was having none of it. She demanded I send the laptop back immediately. I still had no box, no return shipping label to send it back, and it was 10 a.m. on a workday, and I was at work. After 10 minutes of this, I cut her off and told her that I had already been working with 3 other people from the company on this. I told her if she wanted to continue this chat to talk to them first, and then we'd talk, because I was tired of repeating myself, and that I was at work and didn't have any more time for this, and hung up. Karen took this as the ultimate offense and was outraged. I received multiple angry texts, calls, and voicemails throughout the rest of the workday. All from her personal cell phone. This is important later. I called her back when I was finally off work, and she launched into a tirade. She told me I had 24 hours to return the allegedly stolen laptop, or she would call the police and report the laptop as stolen. I still had no box and no shipping label, but she didn't care. I didn't want to pay the $35 to ship it back, but I just wanted this nightmare to end. So I asked what address to ship it to, and she told me. Well, she didn't wait 24 hours like she said she would, because about an hour later I got a call from the local police department about a laptop that had been reported as stolen. I was fuming. To make a long story short, I returned the laptop, paid the shipping fees, got it all recorded on my phone, showed the police officer when they came to my apartment, and that was that. On a completely unrelated note, I had been unemployed for a while before this terrible job, and had shopped around for health insurance. Little did I know that if I went to this incorrect fraudulent website, filled out a certain online form, and clicked submit, my contact info would end up in some database somewhere, and I would be called 2-3 times a day from nameless call center people and automated systems asking about health insurance. The calls finally lightened up after a couple of years and multiple attempts to block spam calls, from going to anti-spam websites to calling my carrier to figure out different options. Now I only get spam calls for insurance maybe once a month. Back to Karen. After the debacle of shipping back the laptop, I knew that my needing to be treated with human decency stressed her out. Getting overly stressed is bad for your health, and I was genuinely concerned for her well-being. I wanted to make sure she had all the possible health benefits she could obtain so she could stay in good health. So I spent 5 hours on my next day off filling out that online form over and over again with her personal cell phone and contact info, changing the details slightly each time. One time she was a smoker, another time she wasn't, but drank. Another time she did or didn't have a spouse or children. You get the idea. And I filled it out and submitted it again, and again, and again. I'll never know what impact it has because she'll never know it was me, and we have no mutual connections, but I'd like to think she now shares my experience with these robocalls. For an added extra super duper petty bonus, to make sure the calls don't die down because I just genuinely care about her health so much, I made a reminder to resubmit the form once per year. Every year. It's been 3 years. Golly, I hope Karen's health is doing better now. Story 4. A little background info. My wife and I bought our house a few years ago, and on the day we moved in, our neighbor, Roger, called the police on us for being too loud during the move. We weren't playing music or even talking loudly. It was just my wife and me moving our belongings into our new home. The police showed up, and I explained that we were simply moving in, and they apologized for the trouble. As soon as they left, Roger came out of his house and told us that he was the one who called the cops, saying he was setting the tone for our new life in the neighborhood. Despite this odd introduction, we were still polite to Roger because we wanted to make a good impression. It was our first home, and it was important to us to make it feel welcoming. About a year later, our first son was born. During this time, we were adjusting to parenthood, and our property maintenance fell to the wayside. A few newspapers piled up in the driveway, and after some rain, they started to stick to the pavement. This was all happening on our property. Roger knocked on our door to complain about the mess. I apologized and explained that we had a newborn and I would take care of it as soon as possible. He dug in, telling me how, when he was a new father, he never let anything affect his property. He accused me of being lazy. In frustration, I said, "If you're so worried about it, why don't you pick it up?" To which he replied, "No, I want you to clean up the mess." I was still trying to be somewhat cordial, so I told him I'd take care of it, and he left. Later that year, Roger came over and asked if he could trim the tree that was hanging over my fence onto his side. I had no problem with it, so I agreed. Then, he casually mentioned how a 17-year-old kid, who was friends with his troubled son, broke into his garage once, and he hit the kid in the head with a baseball bat. He told me, laughing, that he had hit the kid so hard that it caused long-lasting damage. But the police cleared him of responsibility since it was a break-in. I thought to myself, wow, this guy is not someone I want to deal with. A couple of years passed with a few minor run-ins, but nothing too significant. My wife and I recently had our second son just a month ago. About 10 days ago, when our baby wasn't even 3 weeks old, I found a notice on my door stating that my lawn was in violation of the city's code. I had mowed it 2 days before my son was born, so it had been about 3 weeks since, and it had rained several times. I had 48 hours to comply. I called the number on the notice, but got no answer, so I called the non-emergency line to verify what I needed to do. The issue was that one specific type of grass in my yard, which was growing sparsely, had exceeded 12 inches in height. The majority of the lawn was only about 2 to 3 inches tall, but this one type grew faster. I explained that I was a new father and asked for an extension. They told me not to worry about it and to focus on taking care of the baby. Feeling more confident after that, I mowed my lawn in a spiral pattern, leaving some grass taller as a subtle message to whoever had called code enforcement on me. A couple of days later, Roger leaned over our shared backyard fence and asked if my lawnmower was broken. I told him, "No, I just have more important things to focus on right now," and explained that we had just had a baby. I asked if he was the one who called code enforcement. He said he had called them, but not on me. He claimed he had reported our new neighbors on the other side, a very nice family who was always diligent about their lawn. He said code enforcement must have noticed my lawn when they followed up on his call next door. At this point, I told him, "Look, if you have a concern about my property, you can come talk to me directly." He swore he didn't call on me, insisting it was just a coincidence. Fine, whatever. A week later, yesterday, Roger knocked on my door again, and I already knew what was coming. I answered the door, chuckling, and greeted him. He was also chuckling a bit because the whole situation was absurd at this point. He said, "You told me I could talk to you if I had an issue with your property." I replied, "Yes, of course." He gestured toward my lawn and asked what was going on with it. I said, "It's kind of like a message to whoever called code enforcement on me." He became irate, insisting that if it was meant for him, then this was a declaration of war. I reminded him that he had told me he wasn't the one who called, so he shouldn't feel targeted. He ignored me and started his sentence again, but I cut him off, saying, "I'm specifically telling you it's not directed at you, Roger." He didn't care and continued, telling me that if it was aimed at him, it meant war. I laughed and asked, "Over what?" He started getting more upset, calling me lazy and saying my property was a mess, which was laughable. He pointed out that all the other neighbors kept their lawns mowed. I reminded him that I had a newborn and that my lawn wasn't exactly my top priority right now. He puffed himself up and said, "I never had this problem when I was a new father." I told him I didn't care about what he did as a dad, which was ironic since his son, who had a troubled past, lived on the other side and often caused disturbances in the neighborhood with loud arguments, speeding cars, and sketchy visitors. Now Roger was threatening to call code enforcement on me every day. I told him to get off my property. He responded, "Make me." So I told him I was going to call the police. He said, "Go ahead," so I grabbed my phone and started dialing. He finally backed off and stood on the sidewalk, continuing to yell insults about how I wasn't fit to own my home. The police arrived, and although the encounter was pretty uneventful, they did make it clear to him that he needed to leave my property when I asked him to. That was all I really wanted from them. Tomorrow, I plan to take my hedge trimmers and cut my lawn down to exactly 11 inches. Story 5. This story happened nearly 15 years ago when I was in college. It was 2001, and I was a junior studying computer science. I came across a hate-filled website called Dalistan.org, which was an anti-India, anti-Hindu site. At first, I thought it was just some regular discussion forum, so I joined out of curiosity. But it didn't take long for me to realize that the people on there were pretty much off their rocker, and the amount of hatred they had was beyond reason. Once they found out I was both Indian and Hindu, the hate messages started flooding in. These people didn't even try to have a normal discussion. They just went off, and eventually, they banned me from the site. Now, I wasn't the kind of person to just let that go. I decided I was going to mess with them. I started by creating troll accounts and spamming the message board with nonsense. They'd block the accounts, but I'd just make a new one and start again. This back and forth went on for a bit, but it was getting tiresome. So I thought, why not make it easier for myself? Being a computer science major, I had a few tricks up my sleeve. Back in 2001, websites didn't have much protection. There were no CAPTCHAs, no cross-site scripting protections, none of the things you see today. You could literally copy the code for their submission form and submit posts from a local file. So, the first thing I did was create a simple script that would spam the board from one account. They would ban that user, and I'd create a new one automatically. They knew it was me doing this, and at one point, one of them even threatened to send a letter to my university. I laughed at that. They had no idea where I studied, and I knew they wouldn't find out. I decided to lay low for a few days to make them think I had given up. After a bit of silence, I figured it was time to hit them hard. Their registration form had no protection either, so I wrote a script that would do the following. 1. Register a random username. 2. Spam the message board for a random amount of time. 3. Repeat. With this setup, if they blocked one user, another one would automatically pop up and start the cycle again. I finished the script late at night, probably around 10 or 11 p.m., and I set it to run before I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and immediately checked their site. To my delight, there were over 10,000 to 20,000 spam messages all over their forums. The people running the site were freaking out, saying things like, "We've been hacked." They even blocked all new posts except from a few trusted users and started cleaning up the mess. After they spent time cleaning it all up, they cautiously opened the forum back up to everyone. I waited a week, letting them think they were safe, and then I hit them again. This time, I ramped things up. I ran multiple instances of the script, so there were up to 4 or 5 bots posting at the same time. The next morning, when I checked the site again, I saw that there were about 50,000 to 60,000 spam posts flooding every single subforum. The site was practically unusable. Legitimate posts were immediately buried under waves of spam, and even their trusted users couldn't get a word in. After that, they made the forum invite only, trying to control who could post. But the damage was already done. There was still an enormous amount of spam to clean up, and with the invite-only restriction, there were no new users joining. It was like a ghost town. I checked in on the site from time to time, but it was clear they were struggling to keep things running. Eventually, after about a week or two, the site went down completely. I'd like to think my little experiment played a role in that. And that's how I, a bored college student, took down a hate-filled website by using some simple coding tricks. Story 6. This happened when I was about 11 years old, and let me tell you, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So, I had this friend on PlayStation Network. We had been playing games together for months, and I thought he was a cool guy. One day, out of nowhere, he tells me he unlocked the Platinum Trophy for Cars 2 and said he could give it to me if I wanted. Being a naive kid, I thought, hey, why not? I agreed to his offer, but before giving him my account details, I thought I was being smart by changing all of my personal information to fake stuff, everything except my email. I even changed my password, thinking I had covered all my bases. Feeling confident, I gave him my sign-in ID and password, thinking he was really going to help me out. At first, he didn't do anything shady. He just told me to deactivate my PlayStation 3 system, and since I trusted him, I went ahead and did it without thinking twice. I didn't know much about deactivating and activating systems back then, so I assumed it was part of the process. After I told him my system was deactivated, he went ahead and activated his system on my account. He wasn't trying to help me get a trophy, he just wanted to freeload all my digital games and add-ons. I didn't realize it at first, but when my system was deactivated, I couldn't play any of my digital games. That's when it hit me that something wasn't right. I was furious, but I tried to keep my cool. I asked him nicely to deactivate his system from my account, thinking maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Well, that didn't work. Instead, things got worse. While I was sleeping one night, he logged back into my account and changed all my login details. When I woke up the next morning and saw what happened, I was devastated. I cried over it because I didn't know how to fix it. I was just a kid, and I didn't know how to handle stuff like this. I tried to get my account back, but had no clue where to start. In desperation, I called PlayStation's customer support, hoping they could help. But when I explained what happened, they told me my account had been permanently suspended for violating their terms of use. My heart sank. I lost everything, my games, my trophies, all of it. Determined to confront this guy, I made a new PlayStation account and messaged him. He acted clueless. Me, what did you do to my account? Him, what are you talking about? I don't know what you mean. Me, you know exactly what I mean. You changed all my info. Him, I didn't do anything. Chill out. At this point, I was fuming. I threw some insults his way, and that's when he threatened me. Him, if you don't back off, I'm gonna hack your new account too. Me, yeah, sure you are. I wasn't buying his threat. but I also wasn't going to let him get away with what he did. After some time passed, I decided to do some research. I learned a bit about hacking PlayStation accounts. This was my chance to get him back. Since I already had his email address, I used a program to find out the date of birth he used for his PlayStation account. Once I got that, I contacted PlayStation customer support, pretending to be him. Hi, my account has been compromised. Can you help me get it back? PlayStation support. Sure. Can you confirm the date of birth, email, and online ID? Gives them the info. And just like that, they handed me control of his account. I logged into his account on my PlayStation 4, and the best part? He was online playing at that very moment. I basically hijacked his account while he was in the middle of a game. The feeling of satisfaction was unreal. Of course, he noticed immediately. He called PlayStation support to get his account back, but I was ready. I kept contacting them over and over, claiming the account was compromised and needed to be returned to me. This back and forth went on for a while, but eventually, PlayStation figured something was up. Since his account was getting flagged multiple times, PlayStation assumed he was trying to game share or was involved in something shady. So, they slapped a permanent ban on his account. That's right, his account was completely banned. I couldn't stop laughing when I realized all his effort, all those platinum trophies he had earned, were now useless. He wasted all that time, and now it didn't matter at all. And that's the story of how I got my revenge and watched his PlayStation account get taken down for good.